Support the GWM Mission to Africa 2022. To God be the glory. The Global Wisdom Missions, GWM, is embarking on an international missions trip to East Africa and Southern Africa in 2022. The missions trip shall include the hosting of the Intermission Mission Conference, the School of Ministry, the Medical Mission, and the Clean Water Borehole Project. The programs are scheduled to be hosted in the city of Kitwe in Zambia and the city of Nairobi in Kenya. In these international mission conferences, Global Wisdom Missions will bring together thousands of pastors, leaders, and ministers of the gospel from both regions to train them in a 5-day school of ministry in the Ministers Training Seminar. Global Wisdom Missions has the vision of reaching out to young Christian leaders, ministers, and pastors with the purpose of preserving the purity and integrity of the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. The mission to East and Southern Africa in 2022 will be critical because it will be the first of its kind since GWM was founded in June 2020. Following the pattern of our Lord Jesus Christ of preaching, teaching, and healing, Global Wisdom Missions will undertake additional socially responsive programs to bring healing and hope to the communities struggling with poverty, sicknesses, and diseases. Considering this, GWM will travel with medical doctors and health officials from the United States of America, USA, United Kingdom, UK, and Europe, who will volunteer to offer free treatments to thousands of sick people in both regions. Additionally, the GWM will construct a clean water borehole for the selected villages in both regions where they do not have access to clean water. In view of the above projects, the Global Wisdom Missions, GWM, is asking for your financial support and donations to make these missions and projects a possibility. Find a place in your heart to give your financial and material support to this international mission and charitable projects. Your donations will lighten our burden and make our work possible. We remain eternally grateful for your ongoing support. To donate, please visit www.globalwisdommissions.com or donate via PayPal at wisdomconference3@gmail.com. Thank you.
Good afternoon and good evening from Little Rock, Arkansas in the United States to all of you watching from around the world. Once again, we come to you with Wisdom Conference Time with the Doctors. And for the second week in a row, we are discussing living with children with special needs. And my panelists today are a little different, slightly different from last week. We have Mrs. Jacqueline Teteloko, who is a special educator living in New Jersey in the United States. She gave us some nuggets last week, and she's going to give us more. We also are supposed to have Mrs. Mary Amoakufo from Ghana. However, they are having some technical challenges, and so she will join us once that challenge is fixed. And then today, we have Mrs. Mansa Gazy Barnes, also from New Jersey, who is a mother with who has a child with special needs. And so she's going to tell us a story, and we're going to learn from her. And interestingly, she's also an author. She wrote a book about her experiences, and so she can share that as well with us. Now, last week we had Pastor Selassie on, but she's not going to be with us today. And so we will start off with who we have now, and then later on, hopefully, Auntie Mary can join us. So welcome, Mansa and Jacqueline. And we're going to dive right into it. For those of you who were not here last week, we talked about living with children with special needs, and we discussed special needs as not just limited to autism, but some children may have Down syndrome, some children may have Asperger's syndrome, even ADHD, and other problems like cerebral palsy and other things like that. However, for this session, we are kind of focusing on the autism spectrum disorder. And so the lessons that we're going to learn from this will apply to, children with other special needs, not necessarily just autism spectrum disorder. And so, welcome, Mansa. I'm going to start with you. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of what you do, how many children you have, and what are the ages of your children, and just a little bit about you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Mansa Gaze Barnes. I live in New Jersey with my husband and 3 children. I have 3 boys. The first 2 are in college, and the last one is in high school, and he has been diagnosed with autism. He was diagnosed at the age of 3. Interestingly, his preschool teacher was the one who drew our attention. We thought he had a speech disability, so we had booked an appointment to see a speech therapist. But when he started school, the teacher said no, there was more to his problem. So they called in the child study team, and later we were referred to a doctor, and he was diagnosed with autism. So after that, we've gone through a lot of challenges, and I got myself into studying autism. So I had my master's in special education with concentration in autism. So now I'm a teacher for children with disability. And for this year, I'm working with children with autism.
That is incredible. So, so prior to your son's diagnosis, what were you doing? Did you have to change your career completely?
Initially, when I came here to the United States, I started teaching, but I was going to school. I was going to law school.
Okay.
But my son being diagnosed, I just switched to special education.
Okay. So, let's go back to before your son was 3 years old.
Okay.
Can you tell us about, were there any signs that you said you thought he had speech, some sort of a speech impediment, but were there some other signs that you could see that let you know that maybe something was not quite what it was supposed to be?
Interestingly, he met most of his milestones. He walked at the right time. He started talking before one. But later we realized that the talking was only to request things like food or water or something like that. So that's when we went to his doctor and we told the doctor that there was something wrong with his speech. Then he told us to go to a speech therapist, but we had to wait for about 8 months. Later, when I got to know the signs of autism, I realized that children with autism would block their ears and all that. I saw them in the photos we had taken before he was diagnosed, but we didn't know anything about autism. So we didn't know those were the signs. So we missed those signs because we had no idea what he was doing.
So now back to 3 years old, he's in preschool, and his teacher kind of tells you that he thinks or she thinks there's something not quite what it's supposed to be. What were the signs that the teacher saw?
When he started school, every time I took him, he would cry throughout the day. He would isolate himself, sit in the corner, block his ears, and wouldn't play with the other children. There were just about 9 in the classroom, but he just couldn't deal with the other students. So I picked him up after 2 hours every day. That was when the teacher was an experienced teacher, so she said no, there was more going on. So she called in the Lawrence Township Child Study team, and they came to observe him in class. That's when they decided that we had to see a doctor.
Okay. So, but at that time, did she think this was autism, or did you even think that was what it was?
I didn't know. I had never experienced autism.
Okay.
So that was my first time actually hearing about autism. Okay, I've heard about it, but I had not dealt with it. So
Okay.
we were all shocked to hear about the fact that our son had autism.
Okay.
But it was an interesting experience because the township has a very good support system.
Okay.
So we went for meetings every 2 weeks and all that. So at least they helped us to transition.
Okay. So maybe before we get to that part, um, so his teacher says, okay, you need to go see a doctor. So
Mhm.
now you go see the doctor, and the doctor says, okay, he has autism.
Mhm.
How what were your reactions? I mean, obviously you said you didn't know anything about autism. What were your reactions? How, I mean, kind of from an emotional standpoint, and then also kind of your husband and the rest of the family, kind of uh, how did it all kind of go down?
We were shocked. My husband said his chest was hurting so bad we thought he was having a heart attack. I mean, in Ghana, when we talk about autism, we think about the very severe case, right? And my son is not very, very severe. So it's like, autism? No, this can be. We were thinking about the worst case scenario, and it took us a couple of months to actually adjust to the whole diagnosis and everything. But as soon as he was diagnosed, he was transferred to the school district autism program. So at least we had that. And we got to talk to behaviorists and other therapists. So it was hard. It was very difficult, but we came to accept it. Because fortunately for us, we had seen the two brothers and we had seen how they developed, how they met their milestones. And he had problems with speech and processing instruction and all that. So we knew something was not right. His doctor didn't even believe it when we told him about the diagnosis. I mean, his regular doctor. He still thought that it was just a speech thing. So,
So how about his brothers? How did they take it?
well, they were kids at that time, so they just accepted it. Only that, of course, when you have a child with disability, you spend more time with that
Yes.
child. So there was that sibling rivalry, and they thought that we spent more time with him, and I believe we did sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we had to cater for his needs.
Yes. So last week when we talked with Pastor Selassie and Auntie Mary, they talked about some of their experiences where, like, emotionally and mentally, they felt like they were losing it. It was just so difficult. Um, did you experience any of that, like, mental exhaustion or depression, or like feeling like, I mean, like you couldn't take it anymore, that type of thing?
Yes, that comes naturally because you don't, I mean, even now, you don't know what will happen to your child. I mean, your child goes to school, almost every child comes home with stories about their day, but your child cannot tell you what happened. Sometimes they come in and you know that something happened because they are sad or they are not themselves. But that my child couldn't tell me, so I had to figure it out. I had to call the teacher or something. It's draining physically and mentally. And You don't know what will happen if other kids are teasing the child, they're bullying him. It's like every day, every minute is a hassle. So yes, we
Yeah,
went through all that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how about his brothers? Were they teased or bullied because of having a special a brother with special needs?
No,
No. Okay.
that I don't know. I do know that at a point he was in the same school with one of his brothers, and actually the brother was looking out for him,
Okay.
and he was going to his class and everything. So I think they actually adjusted well.
Uh-huh. Okay. So that's good. So um, let's go to, let's say, the extended family, right?
Yeah.
Church, neighbors. How how was the reaction from, say, family members, the neighbors, and then also church? Um,
Family members, it's a bit, how do I put this nicely? Some family members thought that we shouldn't even accept the diagnosis. They told us not to tell anybody because in our culture, when you tell somebody that you have a child with disability, sometimes that family is considered outcast, something. So we were advised not to tell people, and it was difficult because if you can accept my other children, then you have to accept this one too. And neighbors were okay. Neighbors were fine. Church, it was also tricky because we go to a Ghanaian church, and sometimes some of the members did not accept the diagnosis. They thought that it was just delayed speech, or sometimes when he had a tantrum, they thought it was just oh, he was acting out. So it made it a little harder because when you know the child has autism, then at least you can understand the behaviors. But if you don't accept he has autism, then it means that you think that he's just engaging in inappropriate behaviors. So it made it a little bit interesting.
okay. So let me come to you, Jackie.
Yeah.
Last week you kind of made a strong point about kind of not wasting time, early diagnosis, early intervention, leading to better outcomes. So in Mansa's case, the she says it was the age of 3 years when at least the teacher noticed that there was something wrong and said, go see the doctor. So in the grand scheme of things, when you talk about early diagnosis, early intervention, where does that kind of lie in your kind of algorithm of, okay, we need to
Sure.
make the diagnosis early and make sure that we are um, you know taking interventions that will help.
Sure. Early intervention, like considering her situation, that was one of the best situations. She was very, very blessed to have the teacher that she had, who actually has been doing this for a long time and noticed it at the time that she noticed it. And that way the help came quickly. That afforded the child the opportunity to actually be able to learn because now things will be tailored to how he learns. It will be done tailored to his world because autism is a different world altogether. They live in their own world. What we do is that we try to understand their world and try to um, help them learn in their world, even though it's not that easy for us to do. Neither is it difficult, easy for them to do ours. So what we do is we try to peek into their world and then help them through that. And when we find that early, we can gradually bring them to understand the world as a whole. It's easier that way. But the more and the longer you wait, the more difficult it becomes for that child to be able to understand their environment, interpret the environment in which we live, because they're used to theirs and they don't get what you're trying to tell them. And you have to get there to get them to understand it. And basically, you're not. So they just get so used to it that it's not easy to translate them or to gradually help them to understand, interpret their environment. Let me put it that way.
Thank you. So, so coming back to you, Mansa. So the reason why I was asking about church, and I think you made it clear that there were some people who did not want to accept the diagnosis, right? Was there any case or situation where someone was trying to blame you or your family background or something for this, or to say, oh, you didn't have enough faith, that's why you are accepting this diagnosis? Was there something like that? And can you talk about it?
Yes. Okay. So there was a case where somebody actually blamed my father because my father used to be a member of the Freemason. So the person told me that it was because of that my child has autism. So yeah.
How did that make you feel, and how did you take it?
I didn't take it well because I had read about autism, I had studied it, and I knew it was not right. And also the angle, the person who said it made me think that that person was actually just trying to, I don't know, create this. I don't know. It's like you just hear something that makes you so depressed.
Yeah.
It should I say it kills something in you because you don't expect that from this person, right?
Yeah.
And when you hear that, up till now, every time I think about it, I get sad. Because if you can accept my other children, then I believe you should accept this one. Because they're all my children.
Yeah.
That's...
So did you have to deal with any form of like kind of stigma or shame kind of from your own end, or seeing how, let's say if you go out to church or you go out in public, and then there is some tantrum? Was there anything like that? Did you have any situations like that?
Yes. So my child couldn't take loud noise. So every time we go out, he would cover his ear when he hears loud noise. And he was scared of things like lawnmower or the sirens. So he might cry, he may scream. As a little child, people excused that. But when he started growing, people didn't accept it because he was a big boy. And so we had to learn to live with it. We have to learn to ignore what people said or how people looked at you. Gradually, you just ignore and you live with it. Yeah.
So you mentioned early on that right from the get-go, like there were support systems for you. You were going to meetings every 2 weeks, and the school district kind of had a good support system for children with autism. Can you kind of go a little bit into detail about that? And then maybe after that, since you have studied autism, and we have Jackie here, who's also a special educator, I would want the two of you to kind of talk about, okay, where we don't have these support systems, right? What are some of the strategies that parents and families can use to help their children who have autism? So it's kind of a loaded question, but as you answer, you go into detail about the support systems that you had both in the community and at school. I want you to kind of start thinking about how to help those who are in communities where they don't have these support systems.
Okay. So when my child was diagnosed, we went through the IEP process, and then he was placed in a special needs self-contained classroom.
Can you explain what IAP is?
Okay, it's an individualized education plan
Okay.
where he has goals and objectives. And so the teacher would focus on the goals. Let's say maybe for a 3-year-old, they might say he would learn to write his name, or he would learn to identify his name in a group of 3, something like that. So they come up with things that are expected of him. And by the end of the school year, he should have mastered those goals. And then they have another IEP meeting and they create more goals. If the child is not able to master, some of the goals might be repeated the following year. And the law is such that the school would have to try to get the child to master those goals. So with that said, my child received speech therapy and occupation therapy. But we also had a behaviorist in the district who was organizing these meetings every 2 weeks. So we go as parents, those who were able, and she taught us different ways to deal with the tantrums, to deal with some of the children had severe OCD and all that. So she taught us different ways to deal with our children. Then I was also seeing a pediatric developmental pediatrician who also taught us different things. So we used to go there every 3 months. And then I also took him to different therapy sessions at the children's hospital. So that was like privately. So every morning before he goes to school, I took him to speech therapy, sometimes in the afternoons, depending on the schedule. So that's what we did to help him out at the beginning.
So so now to maybe Jackie, you can go first in terms of kind of in places where
IEP?
IEP, speech
Okay.
therapy,
Sure.
I mean, all these things that Mansa has talked about. I mean, that's a lot of resources, and a lot of the people listening to us may not have access to these things. So, what are some things that they could do to help their child, succeed?
Okay. So, for areas where there is no services, the first thing is that this is why the parents need to be on board as soon as they realize something is wrong, because you are the best and the first advocate. If you don't advocate for your child, you will never get anything. Let's take developing countries where the resources are not available. An IEP will not, I mean, there's no team that would be working on an IEP. And an IEP is a good resource because the federal government is really behind it. I mean, as a special ed teacher, you will end up going to court once or twice in your lifetime because of IEPs, because of, because the law works when it comes to that. But in places where there is no law, all I'll say is this: when you are the first advocate, you have to look at how your child learned. Try to work with the teacher that your child has. The placement may be wrong for the child, but it is time for you to be able to, look out and study to help, your child. It's very critical. If you have access to information, look at the signs. It's not every child with a learning disability who has autism. So we have to also look at the fact that it may be autism, it may not be autism, but whatever learning needs you recognize your child has, you're the first point of call. Talk to the teacher, find ways and means, try to seek the child help. If you don't have the resources, it's unfortunate, but as we go along, I will do a little later on in the show. We'll have where I'll show you some of the sites that you can go to and get resources that can help you pick the, things that you can use to help your child. The last week we told, Auntie Mary said about having a printer and a laminator. If there is a place where they have lamination services around you, if you don't have a laminator, or if you can afford to get one, it's very, very necessary in a developing world for you to be able to make cards and stuff to be able to use to help the child. If you don't, if you do have a laminator, that is a plus. It will help you, a printer and a laminator, and will give you sites and for you to be able to go to and then be able to pick up those things. Now, for this over here in America, the law really works. Like I would say again, the law really works. So the help is available for these people. Like but yet still people still don't are in denial. Let me put it there. People are still in denial. I have come across in the 20 years that I've been a special educator, I've come across students who should not be in the setting that they are because their parents are still in denial. And I'm teaching in a high school and they are there. And you know that they're struggling going through the regular system, which if they had been, maybe help had been accepted from the beginning, it would have made a huge difference. Their performance would increase. Their demeanor, their social skills and everything could have increased. But parents are still in denial. And for those children, you see the impact on them. For those who accepted the help and got out of shook it off and we got to do this. Let's fix it right. Let's see how we can help the child and got out of that and began to accept the services. You can also see the reflection on the children because those children actually make gains. And the gains are, they are gains that you can actually see. I've just last year over the summer, I encountered a young man, and I hope that the parents see this. And a very young man of about 6 years old, and he needs services. It could help. And it's our culture, like you said, because the child is also a Ghanaian. And I am the teacher. I'm looking at everything and I see everything. And mom doesn't see. Mom is like, no, this is not what it is. And for things like that, it really, the child gets affected in very serious ways. The child is really the one who suffers, not the parents. And so, when we get to the presentations, I'll just give I have resources that I can show you. And most of these resources are online. They are available. You can do a search for them. And we have free apps. If you have a tablet, if you have a tablet or the internet where you are in a developing country, I know people have tablets and, computers and stuff like that. If you have those things, those resources can also come in very handy, and we'll show you how you can use them to help your child, basically. Yeah, I don't know if I've answered the question now.
Yeah, thank you. So, Mansa, can you also kind of take a stab at it, for people who are in environments where they don't have these resources, both in the school and in the community? What are some things you can tell them?
Okay. The first thing is your child can be treated as a very, very normal child. Teach your child to use their hands. Some parents think that because a child has special needs, they don't allow them to do anything. They don't toilet potty train them. They don't teach them how to dress. They don't teach them how to eat with utensils. Please, the fact that a child has autism doesn't mean that the child is incapable of doing this. Start at home. Teach them like you teach your other children. Help them to learn to write their names. Because if they cannot talk and they get lost, at least they can write their name. Teach them how to say things like bathroom, how to say things like water, I want water, basic things. If they cannot write, you can use hand over hand, hold their hand, teach them how to write something. These are things you can do at home. You don't need a specialist or a therapist to help you with these things because you can do it with your other regular children. So please, teach them like you do everybody else. And then, like Jackie said, there's so many resources online. Get in, find a parent group We have some on WhatsApp, a lot of them. We have some online. Find a parent group. They would give you all the support that you can get. I am in a lot of parent group, both, I mean, groups in Ghana and groups here. When you go there, you get to hear how others are managing. You get to, post your problems and somebody might have a solution to it. So join parent groups. It's a support system everybody needs. Then be like, try to work with the school because your child actually spends more time at school than at home. They spend about 6 hours with a teacher. When they come home, all they do is play, eat, and sleep. So please work with a teacher. See how you can work together to help your child.
Okay, so let me come back to you, Mansa. You mentioned that at the time your son was diagnosed, you knew nothing about autism, but then you educated yourself. You studied it, and you even got your master's in it. So from the point of not even getting the master's, but from the point of you educating yourself about autism, what were some of the things that you learned that were eye-opening to you that you can share with others who may be dealing with a child with autism?
Okay. Before my child was diagnosed, I always thought about people with autism in this very severe cases. I didn't know that we had a wide spectrum where some could be severe and some could be mild. So I learned so much about the different types of autism. I learned about how we can help them to reach their potential. Like a child with autism can actually engage in behaviors because you raise your voice, because they can't stand the noise, right? Or you use the perfume that they don't like, or the color of your dress upsets them. These are certain, just basic things that you never think about. One day I went to my child's school and a child was actually screaming. And the mother pulled me aside and said, there was this teacher that every morning, the teacher was a very nice lady, but she had a loud voice. And every morning when hello, she screams. So as soon as she screams, the child covers her ear and then also starts screaming. So the parent decided that instead of using the back gates, which we used, she would actually go through the office. So this is something that I learned. And then I realized that, oh, okay, so we have to actually observe behaviors. And once we observe the behaviors, we have to figure out what is causing the behaviors and then find a way to deal with those behaviors because they have their sensory issues going on. We do not. So we have to adjust how we behave to make their world a little better for them. So these are some of the things that I learned that I didn't know.
Yeah. So Jackie, is there anything you can add to that? Because I think this is important. Talking about, you mentioned sensory issues. I think last week a little bit was mentioned about that, and Auntie Mary talked about her daughter when somebody was trying to pray for her and put anointing oil on her, and that really upset her. But people thought she was manifesting. But it's because of the sensory issues. She doesn't want anything touching her skin, And so, can you, Jackie, talk a little bit about some of these things that parents
how when it comes to that, I'll go a little bit into the physiological basis of learning. how synapses receive signals and then they fire the neurons and everything. What happens with them that theirs is constantly firing, like for them sometimes they feel they need to touch something. Their nerves at the end of their fingers, they want to scratch or hold on to something. And so if you realize that your child is literally scratching surfaces, what you need to do to help that particular child, an example will be, and I'll give over here they have texture boards that they can use and stuff like that. And so they will be using those to desensitize themselves or to keep it under control. In Africa or developing countries where we don't have things like that, last week I talked about the fact that you can take a thing like this commercial grade carpet and put it on a cardboard and let the child, kind of rub there, depending on how somebody wants a soft, you have to be very observant. With this, you learn and go along. Like Auntie Mrs. Casey, Mrs. Barnes said, you have to know your child. You have to study. So you look at the child's performance. You look at how the child is behaving. If the child is drawn to soft surfaces, find that child a soft surface that child can actually use to calm themselves down. And you can make that out of a blanket or, like a soft blanket, depending on what they are looking for. And then, so like I said, observance is key. You have to be observant. Find what they're looking for and help them with that. Another thing that you could do with the helpful sensory stuff will be a thing like a sandbox, something like a sensory box. We call them the sensory boxes. You can have different textures in it. In places like developing countries where food is, like I would say things like rice and beans, but sometimes there's a family that is even looking for, doesn't have that kind of resource. So if you have things like beets, like, you can mix up different things and put them in a sandbox and let them be able to touch. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a small thing, and let them use those sensory things to calm themselves down as they are going through it. Last week, Pastor Selassie talked about the fact that they can't contain themselves. And that when his son was tired, he wants to jump on the trampoline. You think that he's tired, so he should be sleeping, but he's not. He wants to jump on the trampoline then. So a thing like that, we need what we call a weighted blanket, a thing like a weighted blanket for some kids. Some kids don't need it. Some kids do need it. It will hold them in place. It keeps them, calm. They want to be hugged. When you see that they are rocking and they're going back and forth and things like that, sometimes if they would allow you to touch them, sometimes they don't want to be touched. But if they will allow you to touch them, hold them and rock them together. Let them feel the warmth, like things like that. All these sensory neurons are all over the place. They are firing from every angle, depending on how they're feeling. So this is a very, very, it's important that you take a look, you observe it, and then you see what they are looking for. There's no cookie cutter way of solving all the problems because every child is also very unique. That is why, as a parent, you have to be very observant and you have to look for what they are looking for. Look, and then try to meet that need. I don't know if I'm coming through, but because there's no cookie cutter it's a wide spectrum. It's a very, very wide spectrum. Autism in particular is a very wide spectrum. I was just about to say amen.
Okay. So, yes, amen. The next thing I want us to discuss is, we've talked about the fact that, families that have children with autism, they need support. Okay. One of the areas of support for a lot of people is the church. Yes. And sometimes the church becomes an obstacle because of not wanting to accept that, autism is like having some other medical problem, like hypertension or something like that. And there are resources for helping families. And so when especially pastors are telling parents not to accept the diagnosis, then they don't seek the help that is needed for these children. So, Mansa, maybe I'll come to you first. What can you tell? And there are a lot of pastors that watch this broadcast, and a lot of Christians from all over the world. So what what do you think the church can do to help families who are dealing with children with special needs like autism? What can they do? What would you say, or what would be some of the things that you think, if they say it from the pulpit, it's really demeaning and actually not helpful?
Okay. So, one thing I want pastors to do is to know that autism is real. They have to accept it, and they have to encourage members who have children with autism to accept the fact that autism is real. They can invite people to come and talk about autism in the church. When I was in a Ghanaian church, but I didn't get the support I needed. So after a while, I started attending Princeton United Methodist Church. There, we created something called My Space. They gave us a room. We created a sensory room. It was called My Space, where families with children with special needs could just be there, listen to the sermon on it. I mean, watch it on the TV while the children played. They had toys and other stuff there. And that was really encouraging because most of the families were not coming to church before. But when they realized they had a space there, they were accepted. They were bringing their children. So this is something that the church could think about, creating a space for families with special needs. Because some of the children just want to be on the floor all day. So if they have their own special space, they are not going to make noise in the main church. They're not going to be screaming. So at least they can be themselves, but the families get to worship at church. Unfortunately, sometimes I believe that we blame the devil too much for some things because I sometimes visit different churches to talk about autism. And there was a time that I went to this church and after I talked about autism, the visiting pastor came to say all this can be solved by praying. And I do believe that yes, praying, we need to pray, but we also need the medical services too and other services. So pastors should be aware of that and direct their congregation in the right direction.
I want to say add something to what you just said. It's very, very interesting that people think that it can all go away by praying alone. It's like we have diabetes in the church, and we've been praying for people who are diabetics, and they still need to see a doctor. And I tell students that we just like somebody needs eyeglasses because their eyes are not, that great. Their eyes will not function by itself, and that's why they need something to help them do that, to see better. In the same way that we need information and help for things like autism, because the challenge we have in the church today, and I think that the church needs to be open to learn. I think the body of Christ needs to be open to learn. While you're managing the situation, you can still pray. Prayer does not take away the fact that we need help and we can get the help. For example, if I have a headache that is pounding and I pray to God that God help me get this headache over, and I refuse to take anything for it, and I'm just there and the pain continues and it's disturbing me. I mean, meanwhile, I could have taken a Tylenol that would help me while I still pray that it doesn't show up again. Or, so that is the kind of thing, that situation that we are in with the church. I believe the body of Christ should open up, just like the church that she attends now did and gave a room. There should be a place where students with special needs, people with special needs can gather and be able to have their service as well. And I think that is an awesome thing that was done. I'm so impressed by that. And We need pastors to focus on the fact that help is needed for these people. And if Jesus says that if you I wanted a home and you gave me, I needed food and you gave me food, I was in prison and you visited. These are some of the things that he's talking about. If they need that kind of help, give them that kind of attention, that kind of help as well. And let the Lord take care of it as time goes on. But while they are in that situation, the help needs to come. And the body of Christ is supposed to be standing in the gap with people at this time.
Yeah, that's really important because as we've talked about, children with autism or people with autism, because of the sensory overload that they have, a lot of them cannot withstand noise. And so if they come to church and they come to the main sanctuary with the instruments blazing and everything so loud, they will be screaming, they will be misbehaving. And sometimes, we think, oh, these children are bad children.
They're not actually misbehaving. They're just behaving in their world.
In their own world, because they cannot stand the noise. And so having like that room, I think was a genius idea. And obviously it comes with knowledge, right? Knowledge is important. In fact, today in church, the message was about having knowledge, because the Bible said, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." It didn't say for lack of prayer. It didn't say for lack of speaking in tongues. It didn't say for lack of anything. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And I think that part of it is, in this particular instance, educating ourselves about what autism is and how to support families that have children with autism. Now, Mansa, before we go to your book, can you tell how old is your son now, and where is he in his education now? I think you mentioned that he's in high school, and how is his learning and how are things going like now?
Okay, right now he's 16. He'll be 17 soon. He's doing well. Is he where we want him to be? No. But in his own world, he's doing well. His speech is great. He can actually communicate very well. Okay, only when he wants to, but that's fine. And then, he goes to school, he does his work. He's still in, LD class, not there's a difference. The autism class can have only 6 people, but the LD class can have up to 12. So that's where he is now, which is an improvement on the autism class. And he's doing well. And I believe that the therapies he had to go through as a child and continue to use, they helped him a lot. So
is there something that he does like exceptionally well? Like, yes, for example, last week, Celeste was talking about her son who is in 6th form in the UK. And it's like he does very well in math, just that he does it his own way, right? He can solve some complex math problem in his head and give you the answer. But if you try to teach him the way we teach math, is there something that he does like that? Or
he remembers everything. All you have to do is tell him your date of birth, right? 10 years later, you see him, he would be able to tell you. He remembers numbers. He remembers little information like your birthday, your car, all those things he can remember. He can actually tell you exactly, and directions, like from here to New York, he can tell you go left, go right. He is, schoolwork, he's good, but not excellent. Yeah. And he can, I'm sorry, please go on.
No. Finish your statement.
Oh, okay. I was going to say that somewhere when he was in about 6th grade, he was in spelling bees and others, but now he's not interested in that. So he doesn't,
So it just tells you that, within their world, sometimes, they are geniuses. It's just that they are living in a different world, and it's difficult for them to express themselves in the world that we live in, the way we see things. And as Jackie said, we need to understand their world so that we can help them, because they are living in our world. Everything in our world is made for the way we live. So we need to help them to be able to navigate that. So, Mansa, you wrote a book. Um, and can you tell us first of all, what made you write the book? What is the title of the book? What is it about? And also, where can we find it?
So this is my book. The title of, can you see it?
Yes.
Is Yoku, My Brother, The Enigma Autism. Actually, this is a photo drawn by my son when he was 5 years old.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
wow.
He was drawing himself, so I just used it. Okay. So why did I write it? I wrote it to encourage people to share information, to let people know that there's help, and also there are others just like them. This book is about a girl who has a brother with autism, and this girl has a lot of questions. So her parents try to answer most of the questions that she has. It talks about the church, it talks about the school, and it talks about the family, what they have to go through. How parents will have to smile or endure. How parents will have to be okay with everything because they just want people to like their child or be patient with their child. Even when somebody's screaming at them, they just have to, like, you go to school, this is, let me give you an example. So one day, I got a call from my child's school when he was about 5 years that I should call the doctor to increase his medication. And the person's reason was my son did not like the sound of the clock. So I told the woman that, you want me to put my son on medication because of a clock? Why don't you change his schedule? Because I think he went there when he went at 12 o'clock. So the clock went off at around 12 o'clock. Then she said, "Oh no, the teacher does not like to change schedules." I'm like, "Okay, then why don't you take the clock off the wall?"
Mhm.
And she said, "No, I can't do that. That's school property." I'm like, "Okay, then I will come there and take it up so that when the principal asks you, I took it off." So these are the experiences that families go through. But even after that, you have to smile with the person because the person is dealing with your child. And when your child goes to school, it's a one on one thing, and you don't know what happens there. So this book has a lot of such stories. Most of them are real stories. The names are not real, the characters are not real, but most of the stories are based on real life experiences from the families I talked to, my personal experience, and other things that I've seen or heard.
That is really excellent. Can you tell us? Can you put a book up again and tell us where people can get this? Because I think even whether you have a child with autism or not, as we are talking about, there are many pastors on this forum. It is helpful to educate yourself about some of these things. That even the clear example that she just gave about the sound of the clock
Mhm.
was too much sensory information for the child, and the child cannot stand that. And sometimes we need to make these accommodations. But if we don't have the knowledge, we are not going to be able to help these families. And then what happens is that then they don't come to church. Sometimes not because they don't want to come, but because when they come, the child with autism cannot stand it, and they scream and then distract other people. And so it's important for us to learn. So it's called Yoku, My Brother, the Enigma Autism. So can you tell us where people can find this book?
You can find them at Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Almost every bookshop has it. Mostly online. If you go up and okay, there's the e-book too, so you can download it. So we can find
So
it online.
yeah, you can also search by her name is right on the screen. So if you search,
I am
yeah,
going to put it in the chat too right now.
Sure.
yeah. So that will be a good resource. And even if you know a family that has a child with autism, buying a copy for them might be really, really helpful for them because it will give them information that might help them to navigate, their situation. So now we are going to move to another segment where Jackie is going to do a presentation. We're going to talk about how to help children with autism learn. So she's going to talk about resources that are available and give some of the sites that people can go to get help from the standpoint of educating their children with autism or other special needs. So, Jackie, you can
Sure.
take over.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I put together a few interventions, modifications, and accommodations that we can do for um, students with special needs. Let me see if okay, so yeah, so like I've been saying for the entire time, early intervention happens to be one of the most important things. And in this country, by age 3, children are allowed to get services. I mean, by law, you have to get from age 3 to 21. It's like it's mandatory. If you find out your child, if your doctor tells you there's something wrong with your child, get the child early intervention, and you don't get it, it's considered neglect at that point. So you have to work. Early intervention is very, very important. Let's go to the next slide. All right. So what is early intervention? It is just it's kind of like just like the name says, you give the child steps to overcome the situation that would help overcome the situation or make the situation better at a very, very young age. This is the CDC definition. And I'm using the CDC because we all know the CDC, when COVID hits, they were in charge of literally everything. They literally help us with our health and everything. And this is their definition of what early intervention is. It is a term used to describe the services and supports that are available to babies and young children with developmental delays and disabilities and their families. So it's not just for the child, but it's also for the families that are involved. If you are in a developing world, definitely we know that in most countries this is not available. But in the developed world, yes, it is available. These are some of the things that early intervention may include. And Auntie Mansa actually talked about it. She talked about the speech therapy. It's important. Physical therapy, sometimes occupational therapy, and different like little services like that. You need a speech therapist because if there's a speech delay, these speech therapists help the kids be able to enunciate words. They help them to be able to use their words to describe things and use their words to express the world around them. Our world is such that to interpret our world, you need to be able to use expressive language. Sometimes what the speech therapists do is that they help them be able to express themselves through, talking and through their words. Now, one of the things that we will also encounter is that when you do early intervention, it has a very significant impact. And I have not stopped saying it the entire time we've been talking about this, that it's the single most important step to take when you realize that there is a problem, because it can it has a tendency to make life a little easier for the child and a little easier for the parent in the long run. I'm not saying that the burden is completely lifted. No, but you learn to navigate, and navigation is key. So early intervention will lead to that. All right. Some of the indicators that there is a need for early intervention will be, and we've talked about a lot of them. Parents are usually the first to notice. For last week, our resource persons mentioned that they had noticed it, but they didn't take it. They didn't realize what it was much. And today, Mrs. Barnes also talked about the fact that she saw the signs, but she didn't know what it was. So in situations where the parents don't understand it, yes, most likely your teacher might catch up on it. In the developing world where the situation is not as common and the information is not that common, what we need to understand is that as a parent, like I said, as a parent, talk to somebody, figure out, go online. Now you can put any symptom online in Google and find, like, any behavior, type it, and then you will get something in relation. Find out. If you don't understand anything, find out, just so that you can get help for the child in good time. And the key thing that runs through this is what we call learning disabilities. Now, it's not everybody who has a learning disability who has autism, but most kids with autism have a learning disability. Some of them are geniuses. They don't have a learning disability. It might be something else, but every child who has a learning disability is not necessarily one with autism. Let me put it that way. Okay, so what are some of the benefits of early intervention? They include, but they're not limited to, there'll be gains in cognitive process. I've heard people call people who have cognitive challenges, especially in the developing world, mentally retarded. That is low. I mean, it's not, nobody is mentally retarded. They literally have a cognitive impairment. Doesn't mean that the person is mentally, because that child can learn. If you figure out how the child can learn and you teach the child accordingly, that child can learn. So I believe that we have cognitive impairments. It doesn't necessarily have to be mentally retarded. I don't think it's good. It's a good term to use on human beings in any way. There will be gains in physical, and when speech therapy starts early, these kids can begin to gain their verbal access. They'll be able to gain the ability to express themselves. Expressive language improves dramatically, and when expressive language improves, there is a tendency for social skills to improve, because now they can express themselves. They don't stay away too much, even though when they feel like it, they can, but at least they're able to interpret our world a little bit. Let me put it that way. Now, what I said earlier was that there's some benefits to families as well. Families, because they now know what to do, it looks like when you are in a world where you're not sure, you don't know what to do, the stress alone can, kill you, literally. It can mount on and on because you are moving in circles. But once you get early intervention, you begin to navigate. It will reduce the amount of stress that the families have. What are the benefits to society? Over here in the developed world, what we see is that sometimes people are institutionalized when they don't get any help at all. But it reduces the amount of, when I say institutionalization, I mean where kids are kept in, maybe the child is not very functional because they didn't get the help they needed. So they need to be taken care of 24/7 by somebody, and the parents cannot do it. Or let's say, God forbid, parents are grown and they pass on. That child needs to be institutionalized. But early intervention, like Auntie Mansa said from the beginning, she said you should be able to teach your child to use their hands. What early intervention does is that it's able to teach them to toilet train, to potty, things like that. They're able to do things, little things, functional things for themselves. So it reduces the amount of institutionalization, which means that they can be in a family home and they can be cared for, and they can be taken care of. And that costs a lot of money. So if that is reduced, now, what are some of the signs to look for? Some people don't know what to look for. What are some of the signs that you need to look for? Late talking compared to other children. Some of them will have, and this is not limited to autism. I'm talking about learning disabilities in like as a broad topic. When you notice that your child has late talking compared to other children, and they can't pronounce words, they have pronunciation problems, the vocabulary growth is very slow. They're often unable to use the right word, so sometimes they won't talk at all. They have difficulty rhyming words. They have trouble learning numbers, the alphabets, the days of the week, and things that they should know by a certain age. They don't know them. Now, they're extremely restless, and that one can be linked with neurological disorders that come with the neurological, such as an example would be the spectrum, people on the spectrum. Sometimes they are extremely restless. And I've seen students who are not on the spectrum, but who become very restless because they don't understand a thing that is going on. So they kind of like want out, like in a classroom setting, they want to get out of where they are because whatever you're doing is not helping. And they have trouble interacting with their peers. They can't follow directions easily. That's some of the signs that, or they don't get used to routines. Special education is a very structured thing. If we get out of the structure, it makes it difficult. Why is it so structured? Because students or persons with disability need to know what to do, when to do. They need to be guided to do stuff. So if it's not structured, then they'll be all over the place, and that's where the problems begin. Now, one of the things that people are asking, one of the questions that people always ask is, why is this happening? Why is my child having a learning disability? Why is it that it's my child? Now, this is how we perceive our world. Everybody perceives the world through our senses. We see things, we hear things, we say things because we learned about them. One of the key things that is happening here is that there is an input and output imbalance. Let me put it that way. Usually, one of the reasons why this is happening is because there is an input and output imbalance. Why am I saying this? When we see things, we are able to get it into our brain through, like, we perceive how they work. Perception is a very, very important thing, and it appears to be basic, but it's not basic in everybody. It is a very, very complex function. Let me give an example. For example, I have some folders where I need to store. I need to put them in a, so I have some documents that I need to put in a folder and store them in a filing cabinet. I have received those documents. In the process of labeling them, I labeled them wrong. In my mind, I have labeled them right. But where I put them is not where they're supposed to go. So when the time comes for me to go and pick that information and use it, kind of like in a doctor's office where your name starts with a J and it's dropped in a T. When they go through the J, it's the folders that have the J's. It's going to be so hard to find your folder because it's supposed to be in J and it's not in J. It is in T. This is what is happening in a lot of learning, children with learning disabilities. They're not able to input correctly. So when it comes to retrieval, it is very, very difficult. It is not just what they see, but also what they hear. I have seen this thing done multiple times in different locations, in different workshops, and I've done it too, where you tell one person at the beginning of the workshop, you tell them a statement and you tell them to pass it on to the following people. By the time you get to the 12th person and you ask them what they heard, it is nothing like what you said. This is what is happening. For most people, it will go through multiple steps. Auditory perception. This happens so quickly with students who have learning disorder, disabilities. Now, output. Information is communicated by means of language. If they can't express themselves, I talked about that. Can we please go to the next slide? Yes. Now, some of the things that would help, and don't take it for granted. As a teacher, sometimes you get frustrated. As a parent, sometimes you get frustrated. You want to not repeat things. Please, this is necessary. I want to say it again. It is necessary to repeat things with students who have a learning disability. It is important. Repetition is one of the very important things that you will have to do multiple times. Find ways and means of saying it. You can say it, you can show it, you can demonstrate it. If possible, if the child has a way of feeling it and it's not harmful to the child, let them feel it, so that they can experience it, and then they can create the folders and put them in the right place, like the inputs, and be able to store them correctly. That way, when it comes to being able to retrieve it, it's easy for them to, because learning is the ability to input and be able to retrieve. If you cannot retrieve, we consider, the world says that you have not learned yet. You have the information all right, but you have not been able to learn because you couldn't reproduce it, or you couldn't produce what you were asked. So that's where it is. And the one thing too that I want us all to know, every child in this world can learn. Every child can learn. No matter who they are, they can learn. We just need to know how to teach them. And that is where observation becomes key. What are they doing? What are they looking at? How are they doing it? Okay, if they're doing it this way, possibility is that I can use that method or that way to teach them. And once they get it, they will be doing it. Some of the things that, and in the classroom setting for educational reasons, those of you whose children go to school, there are three main things that I want you to learn, to know. One of them will be modifications. The other ones will be accommodations. And then the third thing will be adaptations. All these are very important in learning. If your child is functional enough and can work at the level that everybody is working, sometimes they'll place them in a class where they have a special ed teacher. Or if they don't, they go to a regular school, and you create a rapport with the teacher or the school, so that they can give your child the necessary help for places where there is no special education. A modification will be, let's say, reducing the expectation or changing the work slightly to the exact work that everybody is doing. Let me give you an example. Sometimes growing up, I went to a school where we come in the morning and we'll do mental math. Maybe we're doing multiplication, right? We'll do mental math, and it's going to be like 30, 40 questions of the same thing. You want to prove that I know the skill. By the third question, you know that I have acquired the skill. Some people have the speed. Some child sitting somewhere who has a learning disability may have acquired the skill, can answer those questions, but they need extra time. The extra time will be an accommodation when I get there. But you don't have to let them do 30 questions. Because what are you trying to achieve? Get the skill, right? The child has mastered the skill through doing 10 questions, 8 questions, 5 questions in the amount of time you have given it. In my classroom, for example, if I have a child like that, and I have, let's say, 30 questions, give and take, if we have enough time for 30 questions, and the child is able to do 8 correctly, that child has mastered the skill because they know what they're doing. They can multiply. My goal is to get them to multiply. They have multiplied. So modification will be sometimes to reduce the amount of work so the child doesn't get scared by the amount of, the work that is going on. Some kids have, they're speed geniuses. They'll do like 100 in 10 minutes. That's good. But you can't match everybody. Like, look at my hands. All the fingers are not equal. If I place my hand up here, this one doesn't need any help to get there. The pinky or the last one needs a lot of help to get there. This thumb also needs help to get to the top, but they can all get there. So however they get there, just give them the chance for them to be. Now let's move on to the next thing, which will be an accommodation. So accommodations are normally not an alteration to the work, but to the environment in which the children are. Sometimes the curriculum needs to be, the format of the curriculum might change. I've had students where I let them do oral testing because they're good. They can tell me everything. They can't write because they're dyslexic. They're struggling. My goal is to push as much as I can get them to write. But there are times when I'll just call them and do an interview with them and then ask them the same exact questions that everybody's answering. And they will tell me the answer because they know it. They just can't express themselves in writing. So an accommodation will be alternating the mode of presentation to allow the students with disabilities to pursue a regular course of study. They would get tested. They would do the work like everybody else, but I have to give them what they need in that situation. Now, when we talk about, I want to go on to the next one, which is going to be adaptation. Adaptations basically will be where we change the quality of the work. Like we change, not the quality of the work, but we change the level of the work completely. Like Mansa told us from the beginning, he said the child has an IEP, and she explained that it is an individualized educational plan. In the advanced countries, every child who has special need, who is classified as a special needs, a child with special needs, has an IEP, has an individualized education plan, where every year teachers and the team of, child study team, it includes a social worker, a psychologist, a speech therapist, a learning disabilities educational teacher consultant, and the classroom teacher. We meet together and we discuss the goals that the child can go through. And normally the goals will be done by the teacher. What have you observed? What do you think the child can learn? You give them the goals and then they look at it. Yes, the child is achievable. Then we work with those goals. And then we have this legal document, which is binding. There's so many laws around that paper, I'm telling you. You have to be done within a certain amount of time. If it's not done by that time, the parent can go to court and things like that. So with this educational plan, if the child is, it might tell us to put a child in a resource room, kind of like the LD class that Mansa was talking about. LD class is a resource class where you have a maximum of 12 students. And so they may be doing something different completely, even though it's, let's say, I have a chemistry class that is an LD class, and this is what I would do. I would take the exact same topic that we are working on, and I'll find ways and means, or I'll take it at the 10th or the 3rd, like the 8th grade level or the 6th grade level, even though we're in a high school, and I'll teach it to that. And once they get it, I'll go in and then I'll try to assess them based on and push it little by little till they can get it. It's the same concept, but it's on a different level of the curriculum. So adaptation is where you actually change the content. You actually change the level at which they're working, because some kids, you need to change it. Sometimes adaptation will be, let's do functional stuff. For example, there are kids in school who are in maybe 5th, 6th grade, where their IEP needs for them to be potty trained. And teachers are working on that. Behaviorists are working with them on that, teaching them how to handle that. And that's because that's what they need at that time. They cannot understand chemistry at that particular time. And so that's what they need, and that's what can be done. So you need to understand these 3 things: accommodation, modification, and adaptation for your child. Now, this is where I give you the resources that that will be helpful. I think I'm going to end up putting them in the chat for those who want to copy, or you can just take pictures of them and then look for them, whichever way you can, do it. But maybe we'll just copy the links and then put it in the chat as we go along. A sensory board is a board where you have different textures. You could just, an example, if you watch this YouTube video, it's a parent who was making it for her daughter. This daughter is very, very young. The child may not necessarily, at that time, they may not necessarily have a learning disability. But if your child has a learning disability, this is key. It's very important because it helps them learn be able to interpret the environment based on how they feel, different textures. It's very, formative years, children are all, they have sensory issues. All children have sensory, their senses are building up, they're beginning to explore. Because of the exploration, you need to give them the opportunity to find out what they need. And so a sensory board will be, in this particular one, they use things around the house, easy stuff. One of the things she used was a regular sponge, the sponge that we use to wash dishes. You know, the netted kind. She used one, there's a net, very soft net, and then you can use any texture. So long as you have a variety, you could use things like that and create a sensory board. And then there's also the sensory bin. That is where I indicated that you could put sand and beads and stuff, but it gives you an idea of all the things you can use. There is no end to what you can use. Sometimes, this for, I don't know, but those in Ghana, the beads for the Marrakesh, the one they used to making the Marrakesh, that thing that we shake to make sounds. It could be used in place of something that is edible, So seeds can be used. You can collect seeds of plants and then you can use them in a sensory bin. So just make sure that they are not toxic, and then you clean them thoroughly and put them in a bin where the child can place their hand in. It could be calming for a child with autism. If they find that it's very soothing, they'll end up using it. Now, the next thing that you could do is that you find the function and feature cards. If you have a tablet, this is why I say that if you have a tablet, it's helpful. You can go to these websites. They're free apps, and I have some of them there. But these cards, if you laminate them, it will help the child be able to tell you, especially when they are nonverbal. These are very helpful. They can tell you when they're hungry. When they want an orange, you have a picture of an orange, they'll go and pick it up and show you, I need an orange. And then you can give them an orange. If they need water, they can point on the card and tell you. It allows you to communicate with a child without the frustration. And for children who have, children who need early intervention, who are a learning disability, that would also help tremendously, because then they begin to use words for, they learn the words. So let's say they pick up an orange, you tell them, this is an orange, this is an orange, and then they begin to connect the sounds to the pictures and everything. And learning takes place. That's why I'm saying that every child can learn, but we just need to know how they learn. And the final slide, I believe, is where there's a ton of them that we can actually get. You can take a picture of these things and look out for them on, I try to find as many free ones as possible. Some of them you have to pay for, but there are some free ones. If you have a phone, mobile phone, Android, iPhone, whichever one you have, or a tablet. Some kids are already playing. Some of these kids already have their own iPhones and phones that they are playing on already. In order to help them, you can download some of these apps that are very educational and place them on those things. A thing like that will be the sounding board. It helps them to print. It's the same as the card that I showed you earlier, but this time it's on the iPad. So it will tell them what they need. They can look for what they're looking for and tell you what they're looking for, and they will read it out or say it for them. And then some of them would learn how to say it after it's been. And then there's also My Talk Mobile. For speech delays, this thing is very, very interesting. And I've taken a look at it. Puppet Pals Theater. It's like a play. It's a theater, like a play, where they choose their characters, they name their characters, they interact, and it's socially, like it's, so it helps them be able to say things that they need to say. So these are some of the few resources that we can give. And then let's say one of the overwhelming things is to go to a new environment. And especially for kids with autism, kids on the spectrum, going to a new place is always a challenge, because they don't know, they have difficulty adapting easily and as quickly as we do. So because they take time to interpret their world, you can start with going places, the app. Let's say you want to go to the mall. You see things in the mall, you talk about it, you show them things, they discuss it, have fun about it. This is what we'll see in the mall. So when you get to the mall, they've heard about these things, and then you begin to show them, ice cream this. And it could be a learning experience because they've heard about it. They're not just thrown into it. So things like going places is very helpful. And for those who have problems writing stuff, GlowDraw is a software that it's an app, it's a free app that when the child begins to trace things, Auntie Mansa said that we should teach them how to write their names. And I think that is critical. It's so important that if they get lost and they're walking in the streets and they don't know anything, they can at least write their names. Glow in the Dark can help you with that if you have a thing like a tablet. It lights up the writing as they go along. So if they're writing their name, they start writing the first, it lights up the whole thing, and they can see, and it's intriguing, something to catch their attention, something that will let them focus. And if it feels good on their hand and they can see it, sometimes it helps, and they're able to learn to. So gradually, before you know, they're writing their names. And so, yeah, this brings us to the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, yes. So I'm going to try and put the links in the chat so that it can be.
Yeah. So this is really helpful. In the sense of giving us kind of a peek into how we have to make adjustments for children with learning disabilities, not just children with autism, but we are talking about autism, and so this applies as well. And then I think the resources that you talked about, were very, very great. A few years ago, one of my relatives, had a stroke and couldn't talk. He could understand, and I was able to find, I bought a tablet and I was able to find some of these apps to help him communicate. So if he wanted to go to the bathroom, he would press that. He knew what he was doing. It's just that he couldn't verbalize it. So he would press that, and the thing will speak that I want to go to the bathroom, or I want to go back in bed. And I think that's exactly some of what you are talking about with some of these apps that can help these children to learn and then also to communicate. So we have kind of come to the end of our time. And so I'll come to you, Mansa, and maybe your last words and advice that you want to give to anybody out there who may have a child with autism, or who may know someone, who has a child with autism. And then I'll come to Jackie before we round up.
Okay, I would like to say thank you for allowing me to be here to talk about autism. To everyone, children with autism can learn. They can adapt. They just need our love, they need our patience. So give them all you have, and you'll be amazed at the difference you will see in their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jackie, have any last words?
Yeah. I would say that let's give them a chance. Let's give every child with a learning disability a chance. Let's not write them off. Let's give them the opportunity that they need, provide them with the necessary resources within our means. And even if we have to push, however we can do it, just so that they can navigate this world. Because whatever we do, they are in our world, but they have their own world as well. So yes, let's give them a chance, because they need it too.
So thank you so much, Mansa and Jacqueline, for coming on. And I can't tell you how excited I have been these 2 weeks talking about autism. Now, I recognize the fact that not everybody listening to us or everyone who will watch this presentation will have access to all the resources. However, I think that there is something that every one of us can learn. And we've talked about how the church and pastors can be helpful in helping families deal with children who have special needs, and not necessarily go on a ostrich-like behavior where we put our head in the sand to behave as if this does not exist. It does, and these children and these families need all our love and all our support. And so I think it's important. Now, one thing that Auntie Mary said last week about her daughter was the fact that at some point, her daughter couldn't go to the regular school. She was paying someone to teach the daughter, and that person left the daughter in the rain for like 3 hours one day. And at that time, she decided, I'm going to start a school for my daughter. And now she has 85 kids in that school. So sometimes there may be challenges, but you can turn those challenges into triumphs. Some people say if life gives you lemons, turn them into lemonade. I mean, that was a clear example of one of those where she didn't have the resources. She didn't, she was at her wit's end, but then she said, I'm going to start a school for my daughter. But, years down the line, now there are 85 kids in that school. And so that is important. And so you may be fascinated what you can do if you put your mind to it, and if you want to advocate for your children. And we shouldn't even leave that only to the families, to the parents. I mean, I think the churches can advocate. And just like in the US where there are laws, making sure that these kids get the help that they need, that they get to be able to learn and get to be functional, we can push in our respective countries to help get resources from our governments to help what the churches can do. And again, if there's nothing that you as a pastor can do, just listening to what Mansa said about the church that they go to, where they have a special room, for kids with special needs, so that they can be in church, and the kids will have their own room to play, and not to be distracted. And I think if there's anything that you as a pastor can do, these are some of the things. And if not for anything, I mean, Mansa has written a book to make it easy to get information. And so I think reading that will help you to become helpful to other families and parents who may have children with autism and other special needs. So thank you so much. And hopefully we'll come back your way next month with another topic of importance. So God bless you and have a good evening.
God bless you too.
Thank you.
Support the GWM Mission to Africa 2022. To God be the glory. The Global Wisdom Missions, GWM, is embarking on an international missions trip to East Africa and Southern Africa in 2022. The missions trip shall include the hosting of the Intermission Mission Conference, the School of Ministry, the Medical Mission, and the Clean Water Borehole Project. The programs are scheduled to be hosted in the city of Kitwe in Zambia and the city of Nairobi in Kenya. In these international mission conferences, Global Wisdom Missions will bring together thousands of pastors, leaders, and ministers of the gospel from both regions to train them in a 5-day school of ministry in the Ministers Training Seminar. Global Wisdom Missions has the vision of reaching out to young Christian leaders, ministers, and pastors for the purpose of preserving the purity and integrity of the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. The mission to East and Southern Africa in 2022 will be critical because it will be the first of its kind since GWM was founded in June 2020. Following the pattern of our Lord Jesus Christ of preaching, teaching and healing, Global Wisdom Missions will undertake additional socially responsive programs to bring healing and hope to the communities struggling with poverty, sicknesses and diseases. Considering this, GWM will travel with medical doctors and health officials from the United States of America, USA, United Kingdom, UK and Europe, who will volunteer to offer free treatments to thousands of sick people in both regions. Additionally, the GWM will construct a clean water borehole for the selected villages in both regions where they do not have access to clean water. In view of the above projects, the Global Wisdom Missions GWM is asking for your financial support and donations to make these missions and projects a possibility. Find a place in your heart to give your financial and material support to this international mission and charitable project. Your donations will lighten our burdens and make our work possible. We remain eternally grateful for your ongoing support. To donate, please visit www.globalwisdommissions.com or donate via PayPal at wisdomconference3@gmail.com. Thank you.